Ask Reddit.
Teachers of Reddit, what are your students' worst attempts to cover up plagiarism? My students had a mini project where they took a scene from Hamlet and rewrote it, modernizing it. I let them work in pairs if they desired. One group turned in, word for word, a scene from the movie Baby Boy where the male and female were fighting and breaking up. Hamlet Ophelia breakup scene. They denied it and denied it. Then I pulled up the scene on YouTube. Then the finger pointing, blaming one another. Finally they both gave in and took their Fs. A student turned in a photocopy of another student's work. In an attempt to disguise this fact, he had traced over all of it in pencil. But why? Why not just copy it by hand onto a blank sheet of paper? It would take the same amount of time. I handed it back to him with a big red 0 and a photocopy of the school's plagiarism policy stapled to it. I was petty enough to trace over that with pencil. Students had to put together a song, rap, whatever about the bill process in US government class. One group played theirs, super catchy, had me bopping along. Afterwards, I was like, who was that on the track? That didn't sound like either of you. One kid was like, yeah, it was my cousin. We wrote it and he rapped it for us. I bought it, but seemed a little fishy. Later, when revisiting it to grade it, I noticed the upload date. It was from 5 years prior. I pull the two kids out into the hall. Anything you want to tell me about your project? No. Well, the date says it was uploaded to YouTube 5 years ago. Oh yeah, my cousin typed in the wrong date when he uploaded it. Did he then watch it 8,547 times afterward? This is in a 10th grade English class. My co-teacher and I assigned a text analysis essay. One student who wasn't the highest achiever but worked really hard turned in what I can only describe as the world's worst essay. It was completely incoherent. It was also mostly plot summary out of chronological order. There was no claim. There was no argument at all. It just rambled for 6 pages. I couldn't figure out what the fuck grade to give, so I gave it to my co-teacher and was like, this is awful, what should we do? We ended up scoring it a 54 and we turned it back. About 2 weeks later, a kid who was a huge slacker turns in a 5-page long paper. I was surprised and I started to read it. It was the same goddamn awful paper. Which, by the way, because the paper was so incoherent it took me like a page and a half to recognize it. I turned it back to him and graded it a 40. Because fuck him, he lost 14 points for making me endure that essay again. So now there are 2 versions of the paper in the school, both with failing grades. About a week later, I got an essay from a student with severe behavior problems. She was upset because she was failing and screamed at me for like 10 minutes and handed me an essay she insisted I read. I started reading it, and it was the same goddamn paper. I didn't want to cause more of an issue with her, so I graded it a 40 and turned it back. I still cannot believe to this day I had to read that essay 3 times and that 2 different students copied a paper with a failing grade. Had a 13-year-old turn in a project on birds. The last line of the introductory page stated, hopefully my 40 years experience with parakeets will help. That was a staff room favorite for years. Had a kid once turn in a sports newspaper magazine style article. This dumb dodo not only copy-pasted the article in its entirety off a well-known site, but when he removed the photos, he left the caption text in. To really top it off though, he left the published on date and real author's name and the name of the site it was published to at the bottom. This was many years ago. When I was in college I was good friends with an English professor. His class had to write a poem. I was reading through the poems, and one was clear as day, the words to an Eric Clapton song. I got the CD and played the song for my friend. His student didn't know the old professor would have a young hip friend. My mom used to be a TA and her favorite story was the time she was correcting an assignment and 2 of the students clearly copied. My mom, not in the mood for this shit, so she graded the first student's assignment, put the same grade on the second student's, and added a note on both which said take your grade and divide by 2. They both failed. One of my college professors once told us of a student who copied another student, word for word exactly the same. Rather than looking at it word for word, he got the hash of both of those papers. They were exactly the same. They both failed. I am in fact a teacher, but I need to vent about when I was in 5th grade. We had to write L and recite a limerick. It's just a few lines. And yet Erica L. recited Shel Silverstein's "There's too many kids in the tub" from A Light in the Attic as if she wrote it. My teacher praised her, which filled me with rage, but I didn't rat her out. This doesn't exactly answer the question, but one of my students this past year plagiarized Amazon reviews, which I found hilarious. Normally they use shady essay sharing sites, so I found it refreshing. Still made him rewrite it though.